The 2028 presidential election is still about 4 years away, but I've been developing my election model as time has been going on to be the most accurate forecaster for the 2028 presidential election. Looking at my battleground map here, we can clearly see that I have a model that is basically tied at the national popular vote, so it is basically a 50-50 split. And it shows all of the adjusted PVIs and trends for all of the states. And I'll be going over the characterizations for each state today. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. Make sure to go down below and check out my onpointpolitics.com website where polling averages are going to be included with only the most accurate pollsters so you can get accurate data regarding approval ratings, the nation's direction, and future election matchups. Looking at the safe Republican states on the map, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, both Dakotas, as well as all of Nebraska except the 1st and 2nd congressional districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, and South Carolina will be included in the safe Republican column. We can see that the states have minor shifts compared to their 2024 counterparts, with some states staying relatively stable to their 2024 counterparts. But one theme that is consistent is that all of these red states are about a point to the left of what they were in the 2024 presidential election, given that this is representing a tied national environment, with Oklahoma shifting 2 points to the left from 2024, Arkansas showing a very minor shift to the left, as well as like Mississippi and Louisiana showing very minor shifts. Mississippi actually doesn't even really move at all. Alabama, a very, very small shift to the left, including South Carolina. So not really big. West Virginia still moves to the right by about 2 points, given its super Republican trend. But we do see here the two biggest shifts, actually the three biggest shifts going into the next election are states that are surrounding the state of Colorado, which you can see in a tie national environment shows up as a D+18 state. And we'll get to that in just a second. But we can see here, Utah, Kansas, and Nebraska are all shifting pretty hard to the left compared to their 2024 counterparts. Nebraska, it's like a 3-point shift to the left. Kansas, it's a pretty decent shift. It's like a 5-point shift to the left, and like Utah is like about literally almost a 10-point shift to the left, like a 9-point shift in some of these states. Given that they are heavily college educated states, they have a lot of voters that are college educated that are white. And so because of that leftward shift with this group, you are seeing certain areas that are growing in its urbanization, as well as college transplants. You are seeing them vote to the right, to the left of their 2024 counterparts pretty massively on this base map, although they still fall into the safe Republican column at over 10 points. Looking at some of the other safe Republican states, we have the state of Iowa and Ohio, as well as Florida and Texas. Given the Republicans' gains with non-college whites as well as Hispanic voters, Donald Trump made these states go from basically competitive battlegrounds, back in 2012, where, Texas was safe, but Iowa was basically a likely Democrat state. Ohio was lean blue, as well as Florida being tilt Democrat. These went from being weird states all the way to going, in the safe Republican column in 2024. And albeit though, you do actually see some minor shifts to the left, like Iowa shifts like about a point to the left. We see Ohio actually shifts like 2 points to the right. Florida, a very minor shift of like 2 points to the right, and Texas is still, about a 10-point win. So like a 3-point shift to the left, given the expectation of future college-educated transplants moving to Texas. We do still see that they are all above 10-point victories. Texas barely above the 10-point column there. And Alaska is also still above the 10-point column. It does shift to the left by 3 points away from its 2024 counterpart. So this is pretty interesting as well. And we do see here that that is it for the safe Republican states at 217 electoral college votes. For the Democratic safe states, we have California, Oregon, Washington, as well as Colorado. You know, Oregon and Washington, they voted for Harris by pretty decent margins, albeit here you see Oregon is a 19-point win for the Democrat, Washington 23 points, and California just a 22-point win. So Oregon and Washington shift to the left more than California does. And the reason why is because the Hispanic vote in the model is holding a little bit more consistent. It doesn't shift as much to the left as the college white vote does. And that's why you're seeing these like really big improvements in certain areas of the country. Now, we move on to some of the other blue states like Illinois, which did vote for Harris by only 11 points. You do see about a 3.5 point shift in favor of Harris there, but in favor of the Democrats in the 2028 hypothetical map. But again, even like Maryland, Delaware, you know, Connecticut, Rhode Island, these are improvements, except for Rhode Island. Rhode Island actually shifts like 0.5 point to Republicans given its Hispanic population, staying a little bit more consistent with 2024, albeit these are all still safe Democratic states. And New York is still a safe Democrat state, including the state of Hawaii. Hawaii actually ends up being about a 20.5 point win, so it's a 3 point shift away from the Democrats. But New York actually still shifts in favor of the Republicans in a tied national environment in the next election, given its humongous shift towards Republicans in the 2024 election. The model is still picking up a pretty huge Republican trend in the state, and it is barely above the 10-point column. It is almost a likely Democrat state and could be a likely Democrat state heading into 2028, depending on who the candidates are. Now, Maine's first is still going to be in the safe Democrat column here. You know, it is still very much in that safe Democrat column. However, the most surprising addition to this column is actually going to be Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. It voted for Harris by just 4.5 points in 2024. In the model, it is shown to be a safe Democrat district, with Nebraska's 1st and Maine's 2nd being the only likely Republican states on the map here in terms of a generic performance in a tie national environment for a Republican and a Democrat. Nebraska's 1st ends up only being like a 7-point win for the Republican nominee, which is a huge difference compared to Trump's 13-point victory there. But the state is in fact trending massively in the leftward direction, and I could actually see Nebraska becoming a swing state in the 2040s, given the Colorado Great Plains area shifting massively to the left, as well as Kansas and Utah potentially moving in this category, but that'll be for a much later discussion. Now, looking at some of the other states here, what I was saying in 2024 was that if the president shifted the national environment to the right by a bunch of points, there was no way he was going to lose any of his 2020 states. And that applies here. I mean, if you're shifting the Democratic, if you're shifting the national environment of a Trump plus 1.5 win to Democrats and Republicans being tied, the Democrats aren't really going to be losing any of their 2024 states. So Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine all end up in the likely Democrat column. New Mexico at 8.7%, so this is like a 2.5 point improvement in New Mexico. Minnesota at 7.2%. I mean, Harris won it by 4, so that's a 3-point improvement. Looks more like 2020 Minnesota, if anything else. Virginia is exactly an 8-point margin in this, so about roughly, give or take, basically like a 2-point shift to the left there. So it actually shifts less than even like Minnesota does, so that's interesting. And New Hampshire shifts all the way to like an 8.7 percentage point win. Now, the reason for that is because the model is picking up an anti-incumbent trend in the state where it tends to swing away from the incumbent party quite a bit, and that being the Republican Party as of right now. You are going to face major major challenges for a Republican nominee to flip the state of New Hampshire into the Republican column in the next general election, and will most likely stay with the Democratic nominee. Now, looking at the rest of the battleground states, these are all of the states that are going to be decided by under 5 points. And yes, New Jersey is included in this vote column. North Carolina is going to be leaning Republican. It was voting for Trump by 3.2 percentage points back in the 2024 election. In my tied popular vote 2028 battleground map, it shows up as a point less Republican than it did in the last general election. And given the Republican voter registration trends in the state, it may as well stay in the Republican column, even if the Democratic nominee ends up winning the general election in 2028. However, this does pose a question in terms of the state of North Carolina, because in general elections like these, if the Democrat were to win the 2028 election, they would have to flip a state that Joe Biden didn't win in the 2020 election, because there has always been a consistent rule where when the party flips the White House, they usually tend to win a state. The candidate wins a state or more that the last person who flipped the party for that White House or flip the White House for that party, they have to win states they didn't win. So for example, in 2016, Donald Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania when he flipped the White House from Democrat to Republican. But when Bush did that back in 2000, he didn't win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. And you can see here, when the Democrats flipped the White House back in 1992 from Republican to Democrat, Bush did not lose Virginia, and Clinton actually didn't even end up winning Virginia. But when Obama flipped the White House from Republican to Democrat in 2008, he ended up picking off Virginia. And the same thing in 2008, Obama did not win Georgia or Arizona when he flipped the White House from Republican to Democrat. But when Joe Biden did the same in 2020, he did win Georgia and Arizona. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that usually when the White House flips parties, there has to be enough of a demographic shift for this to occur. And the most realistic state for this to happen to is North Carolina, which at that point would put Georgia in like the likely Democratic column. You'd have a significantly bluer national environment if that ended up being the case. Now, looking at the other states here, Georgia is a lean Democrat state in my ratings, given the shifts in the Atlanta area, which you will actually see are the most pronounced in the 2024 election for Kamala Harris. There's really no denying that this area is going to continue shifting left. While you may see some rule reversion for the Republican nominee, given Donald Trump's huge strengths, in rural areas, they may not be able to replicate this to a T in the next general election. And so the model has Georgia trending a lot to the left. It actually trends like a couple points, and it is a lean Democrat state in the next election cycle. New Jersey, on the other hand, is only a 4.5-point win in a tied national environment. So despite the nation shifting left, it still shifts 1.5 points in the Republican direction. So this is very interesting, because if you end up having the Republican win the national popular vote again, you may potentially get a New Jersey flip for the Republican in 2028. So this will be in the lean Democrat column. Arizona and Nevada will also fall into this category here. The map shows Nevada as a 3-point win, so similar to 2024. Arizona, on the other hand, shows up as a 2-point win, despite it being a 5.5-point win. This is because the model is picking up on college white trends in Arizona and a lot of college-educated transplants moving to Arizona, which kind of resets the base margin there. So barring any Republican registration data benefiting Republicans, it's going to end up being a lean/tilt state, maybe even a toss-up state in the next general election. Now, Michigan and Pennsylvania, funny enough, end up voting in the lean Republican column. Michigan at 1.2% and Pennsylvania at exactly a single percentage point. Funny enough, on this map now, Michigan is actually the most Republican Rust Belt state out of the three. The only reason why I think Pennsylvania ended up being the most Republican was because of the assassination attempt on President Trump's life. If it hadn't been for that, I actually think that Pennsylvania would have been the second most Republican, and Michigan would have probably ended up being the most Republican. And I think against Biden, Trump would have done better in Michigan than in Pennsylvania even. The only tilt state on the map is Wisconsin, which comes in as a 0.1 percentage point win for the Republican candidate. So it's really close. It could basically go in either direction. The state has a lot of retirees moving to it, but you also have some shifts with some demographics in the state. So despite the nation shifting 1.5 points in the scenario to the left, it's still only shifts like 0.8 percentage points to the left. And so given that, it is still basically the only toss-up state on this electoral map of 10 electoral college votes. It could basically vote in either direction. And so that is it for this video. This is a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat in a tied national environment in my modeling, facing off each other in a hypothetical 2028 presidential matchup. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.